All right, it's the weekend, and I think today I'm going to have enough time to spray down the underside of the Trans Am. But before I do that, there is some slots here that somebody cut out, and I still got a little bit more work to do over here on my wheel well. Got to tack that over to that and do a little welding there. And also, right up here, somebody drilled some holes, and I can't figure out why they'd be drilling holes there, but they do need to be filled up. So I'm going to do a little bit of welding here and there, sand everything down, and get it ready to spray the POR 15. I've been heating up this undercoating and scraping it off. I got a little bit more to do over here, but we'll get that all cleaned up and sanded down. And we'll just go start from the front and work our way all the way to the back until we've got everything coated. So we're going to do a little bit of welding and then a little bit of painting. Okay, I got all the little spots welded up and sanded down. Got this little slot here filled in. Did a little repair there and sanded down some of my plug welds. Now, what I gotta do is one of the last things before we start spraying. I gotta get this undercoating off, see if we can sand some of this rust out of here. And I think after that, we'll be ready to go. And we'll see if these little dude here with a stripper pad on it is going to do anything. If not, maybe we'll have to use some 36 grit. But we're going to try any and all methods to get this off of here. I heated it up here and scraped it, but it kind of burns your hand even with gloves on because it's like molten tar. So we're gonna see if we can sand the rest of this. Ain't much of it, so I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this stripped down and looking good. Got this wheel well over here cleaned out and getting ready to mix up some POR 15 so we can just spray the whole underside of the car. And as you can see, the 36 grit worked a lot better. Stripped out all that undercoating, got it all cleaned out. So I think we're ready to go on this, and we're just gonna start somewhere, I don't know, somewhere, and then just spray everything underneath. So here we go with that. Okay, gonna mix up some POR 15 and you reduce it with xylene. And I had a couple of leftover cans. I knew this had one in it, had some in it, but I think between this one and this one, I almost got more than a full can. So we're gonna use that up before we use the new can. And I'm gonna reduce it down to where it can go through the gun. And I just got one of my old primer guns because this stuff's hard to clean out. So I'm gonna mix up a fairly decent batch and see if we can't get some of this sprayed underneath. And if I got some left over, I'm gonna spray the axle for the Mopar. And you'll see that in another video coming up in a while. But for the meantime, we're gonna spray the underside of the Trans Am and get it all slathered up really good underneath. Pour a little bit of this, and then you do a little stirring, and we'll see where we're at. It might be a little bit thick. Probably better to have it a little thin than too thick. I want things to glob up. So we'll just do it a little bit more and we'll see where we're at there. I think we're gonna be about good with that. All right, we're gonna get it put in the gun and go ahead and start spraying. We've pretty much got her sprayed down all the way from the very back all the way up to the front, and all the frame rails, got everything, all the floor pans and stuff we put in all well preserved, all the way up in here in the trunk area, and just slathered on thick with POR 15. So now when that dries, about the only thing we got left to sand down is the roof, the deck lid, and one of the doors has a new door skin. This door needs some repair right there, but it'll need to be sanded down. So basically we got to sand down the door, the roof, and the deck lid, and we'll be ready to start doing the body work and getting primer on it. And I need to get my rear end cleaned up so that we can bolt the frame on over there and get it a rolling chassis again with 2 doors on it. and then we can start working on the fenders and hood and all the rest of the pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep on working on this body work and sanding off old paint, and just keep at it until we get it back halfway together, enough to start doing the paint. Okay, now that we got all the metal work done on the Trans Am here, it's time to get it back into a rolling chassis. And I've got to get this rear end up on jack stands, get the wheels off, take the leaf springs off, do all kinds of cleaning up on it, probably put some new gaskets and seals and whatnot, check out the brakes. And if you watch one of our earlier videos, I've already got the subframe all cleaned out, sandblasted, new bushings, new coil springs, new ball joints, everything all back together with the A-arms. Got some new motor mounts. So we should be ready to put this back on the ground and get it off of the dolly, so that be a little easier to reach the roof. Got to sand all this old paint off. I did a little test sample here where I used the paint stripper pads, and then I'm gonna run the DA over it, get that all cleaned up, get all this old goo off of here, clean all the dirt and dust off, go inside, clean everything out, and we'll spray everything down with some primer sealer. And then we can do a little bit of work on the body work and start the process of putting her back together. But POR 15 all underneath there, it's all dry now. So we're gonna go ahead and get to work on this rear end, because it's just way too nasty to put back in a car that we're completely restoring pretty much. So gonna get to work on that. Okay, this leaf spring is stuck in the rubber mount, and I beat it on it. It don't want to come out. So I'm trying to pry bar. Come on. Jeez, that is stuck. That is rusted to it. Try over here. Oh, that rubber is rock hard. Finally. Okay, we got the leaf springs off. Awesome. Okay, I got the brake lines and brake hose off. Started doing a little cleaning, and of course it's got a tag on it, and I thought it had the ratio, but it says use limited slip differential lube only. So that right there tells you that it is a posi track. So this is a pretty cool rear end, so we want to get it cleaned up, put some seals in it, and make it look good before we put it back up in the car. Before I take that cover off to get in there and pull the axles and change the seals, I want to get some of the outside junk cleaned off so we're not getting outside junk into the inside. So it's going to take a lot more cleaning and de-rusting, but we're just going to keep at it until we get it looking really good. right, after about a week of evenings, finally getting this rear end pretty well cleaned up. And I've got my backing plate off over here and cleaned up and painted. And got the axle out, got it all cleaned up. And I still got to pull out that axle and the backing plate, clean them up and paint it. And I've got all the brakes tore down pretty much completely. And I got the seals, differential cover, I've got brake shoes, and hardware kit. And I'm still waiting on the wheel cylinder kit. Got it cleaned up, ready to go back together. And one thing, if you ever work on one of these older cars and you're doing drum brakes, there's certain things you just can't get in a kit. Now this, the self-adjuster, you can get. Of course, the hardware kit, all the springs you can get. But this, the parking brake arm, the spreader, and this little airplane looking dealie that holds the two brake shoes together in the center up by the wheel cylinder, you're not going to get those in any kit. So you might want to, you know, clean them up and paint them so they don't rust into oblivion. So I'm sure there's some restoration sites where you might be able to get these, or used on eBay. But if you got them, you might as well clean them up, preserve them pretty well. So I think I'm gonna get this backing plate back on and start putting my brakes back together before I put the axle in. Then we'll put the seal in there and get it sealed up with the differential cover, and go ahead and work on the other side. It's pretty nasty and rusty, and the shoes are wore down pretty thin. So we'll get that pulled out of there and cleaned up and put it all back together, and then we're gonna paint the whole thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and get busy on that. Alright, we've got that backing plate on, and I got all my brakes took off over here, and I'm ready to pull my axle on this side. And I always just assumed that everybody knew how to do this stuff, but for you young wrench turners out there that might want to know how to do this, I'll just take a minute and show you how you pull a C-clip axle. So what you're going to see when you take off your differential cover is you're going to see this little 5/16 bolt, and what that does is it holds this larger pin in place. The little pin goes through this hole. Now this pin goes up against the end of the axle like so, that keeps it from going inward. So once you've pulled out that little 5/16 bolt, you slide this big pin out and you rotate it around. And if you look up in there carefully, when I push this axle in, if it wants to go, okay, I have to give it a good whack. Now if you look down in here carefully, you'll see the end of the C-clip. And if we rotate it around, well, it just fell out. There we go. Now, once that's out, your axle will slide out. Just like that. Now, going back together, what you're going to want to do is put it on a magnet tool, and you slide it up in through there like so once you put your axle back in, and then pull out on it. You put your pin back in. Of course, you have to have both axles in, and put your little 5/16 bolt back in there, holds the big pin, and you're ready to roll. So that's how you pull out an axle on a C-clip. Okay, had a little change of plans on the wheel cylinders. I was wanting to go with the originals, just, you know, to keep the car more original. But nobody had 2 rebuild kits within 100 miles. There was only 1. So we ended up having to go with the Chinesium. Hopefully they'll work okay. But O'Reilly's had them in stock. Nothing against O'Reilly's. Everybody sells the Chinesium stuff. But it was nice they had them in stock. So ran down there and got them. So that way we can kind of continue with the brake project. Because your wheel cylinder is the first thing that needs to go on before you put all your other stuff in. So I've got the other backing plate cleaned up, waiting for the paint to dry. And we'll get that one bolted on over there, and we'll start putting our brakes back together. Alright, we got our axle seals in, our differential cover on, and axles put in, and now we can go ahead and start putting our brakes together. I got my wheel cylinders on there, and I know a lot of people don't like doing drum brakes, but if you just get it in your head that it's gonna, you know, you're gonna drop the spring 52 times, things are gonna fall off, you need 5 hands. Well, you know, if it only takes 28 tries, well, doesn't seem so bad. But we're going to go ahead and use a whole lot of patience and get these drum brake shoes put on, and that way we can move on to painting this dude up. Alright, got this side together, and I put the adjuster up in there, and got this side all together except for the adjuster. And I've seen where a lot of people make this common mistake. They will put the adjusters on the wrong side. Now what you want to do is look at this self-adjuster and see which way it will turn it. And if it's turning that direction, it should be spreading out, not going back together, or else it will completely loosen your rear brakes and your pedal will go to the floor. So just something, little tip to make sure you're getting them on the right side. Just make sure they're turning the right direction. One side's left-hand threads, the other is right-hand threads. Now on a lot of these, they'll put a L or an R right there on the end, but these don't have it. So you just gotta kind of see which way they're gonna turn and make sure you got them on the right side. So we're gonna get this together and start painting it. Okay, we got all our brakes done, and we yesterday sprayed it all down with etching primer. So I'm going to go ahead and spray it down with my favorite color of metallic paint, and then we'll be ready to clean up our leaf springs and stick this dude in. Okay, I got my center brake hose. AutoZone was nice enough to bring it over. And going by the old brake line, I've got this copper tubing bent up pretty close. And I'm going to take it in here to the flaring tool and get it flared up. Now, this one is about the right length. The other one I think had been replaced at one time, and it's like way too long. So we're going to try to make it look a little bit better than that. We'll do that in place and kind of bend it around, then flare it. So we'll go ahead and flare the ends. Okay, if you're ever going to flare a lot of brake lines, this is probably the best tool I've ever had. And it's pretty easy to use, and it works really good as long as you remember to put your fittings on first. So it's just a two-step process. Get your tube in there, and got to leave it a little bit long, and you let it stick out, and you clamp it down semi-tight, and then you, well, semi-tight, push it all the way back. That sets it in place. Then you tighten it down, and you go, this is 3/16, so let me find 3/16 on here. First one are green, second ones are orange. And you go ahead and do your first part of your flare, and then you come around to the second one and finish your flare. Okay. let's see how it turned out. All right. I can get my fitting unstuck. Doesn't like going around curves. But there you go. Double flare. Awesome. Okay, let's see if I bent this right. See if we can't get these to start. And if we can get them at the right angle. Got that one to start. Sometimes it helps if you wiggle the line a little bit. You always want to start these by hand, because if you put a wrench on it and it's hard to turn, you're probably cross-threading it. So I like to screw them in as far as I can with fingers, then tighten them with a regular wrench, get them down close, and once you get them close with a regular wrench, like put a tubing wrench on and really snug them down tight. Of course, once you get everything together and go to bleed your system, you always want to check them for leaks. But so far it looks like probably going to seal up pretty good. Alright, even fits in a little tab. Man, that looks good. Alright, now we can move on to the other side. Okay, we have both of our brake lines run, everything cleaned up, painted, brake hose on, all new brake shoes and hardware, wheel cylinders. Got this rear end in pretty good shape, but it's going to have a little bit of delay putting things back together, because I discovered on closer examination that after I took this piece of rubber off, this leaf spring is correct. So looked them up. Summit Racing has the best deal, so I think we're gonna have to scrape up a little more money and see if we can't get us a couple pair of leaf springs. All right, it's about a week later, and the FedEx lady dropped us off a pair of leaf springs. So meanwhile, I've been gathering up all of the bushings and pads. We got leaf spring bushings, body mount bushings. I got my brake drums cleaned up and sprayed them down with caliper paint. And I've got all my shackles cleaned up and primered, leaf spring mounts, little rear sway bar mounts, U-bolts, little pockets for the front of the leaf springs. Got new bolts. The only bolts that I had to kind of save is these for the shackles, because they're a special carriage bolt with a little square end. And got new body mount bolts. And I think we're just about ready to go ahead and start bolting the leaf springs onto the rear end. We'll stick the wheels on it, and then we can roll it around. And then one of these weekends, we'll go ahead and get the rear end bolted in, and our subframe that we got cleaned up and all new bushings and everything in. So we're going to go ahead and get our primered brackets and paint and let that dry. So here in a couple days we'll be able to start putting the Firebird back together. Well, sun's going down over there, but I think we just about got this rear end ready to go in. Got my brakes adjusted, got the drums on, put the wheels on, got leaf springs with all the bushings, sway bar in, brakes, brake lines. Yeah, this dude's about ready to go in there. And then of course, if you watch one of our earlier videos, we got our subframe with all new coil springs, ball joints, bushings, all painted down with POR 15. So I think that's going to be about it for this video. Next time around, we're going to be bolting the Trans Am back together and getting it rolling, so we can start working on the body work and working on the fenders, fitting all that stuff up on the front, and just continue on. So it's nice to be in the putting back together process. So we appreciate y'all watching, and just stay tuned to see more stuff on the Trans Am.